This is Christian Gleinzer from Dr. Buru Industries, and you are listening to Scene World Podcast.
Hey everyone, it's the Scene World Podcast. I'm AJ. Joerg is that way over there. We are locked in quarantine, away from everybody else.
Yeah, but still, since Scene World is anyway an international project where we work from home, this is no change for us when it comes to this.
Yeah, we're kind of doing a public service here because, people are stuck at home and they got nothing to do, and so now at least they can sit here and look at us.
Yeah, or listen to us because this is audio only. Yeah.
Well, just listen to us. That's cool. It works too. Yeah. There's plenty to look at if you want to go onto the YouTube channel and watch the past videos.
Exactly.
We got a whole 24 hours of Extra Life the one year. So
yeah, that's true. And nice interviews like John Mack, who did Operation Frog, and learn about the first program where you could surgery on living animals.
Yes. Anyway, that's not what this podcast is about. We are talking to... Who are we talking to? Tell us about this.
Johan Grip. And we are talking about a new C64 board named the C128 Neo.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've been sitting on this one for a while.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it seemed like now that we're all stuck in home and we could all use something interesting to listen to, this is a really good one to listen to.
Yes.
So, oh my God.
Because the C128 RM unfortunately didn't happen, so...
Yeah, it didn't happen. It didn't, which is a shame because I really liked that idea. I mean, I was kind of iffy on the whole putting it in a C64 case part. I wasn't really sure how that would work, but I encourage people to do what they want and to follow their dreams and live their fantasies, and that's cool, great, fantastic.
Yeah. Anyway, new guy in town, new project.
Yep.
Let's see.
And unlike the 128 RM, this one is not really looking for funding. The guy's just doing it to do it. So there's not much pressure, and there isn't much in the way of, it's not like people are investing in it or he's looking for investment in it. He's just doing it. So we're giving a little bit too much away. So we should talk about other things.
Yes. Anyway, so first of all, a little correction, because our last podcast with Josh O's from Let's Encrypt, we, in our introduction, we unfortunately said that this project was sprung from Mozilla, and he is working at Mozilla. No, he's not working at Mozilla. So that's a little correction.
Okay.
What he meant is he worked at Mozilla when he founded Let's Encrypt.
Right.
But Let's Encrypt is not part of Mozilla, and he doesn't work for Mozilla.
Right.
So it's an independent project, and we didn't picture that entirely correctly, so sorry for that. This is the correction here.
Right.
Yep.
So I got a bit of news, which I actually learned on QLink. I finally had a minor incident with my Commodore gear, and had to sort of take a break and try to fix it and clean it up and put it back where it was. And I did that, and the first minute I logged on to QLink, the welcome message was different than it normally is, and it informed me that, and I think I sent you a screenshot of this, that the Retro Fair and Vintage Computer Festival events have been postponed and or canceled for this year, again because of the whole COVID-19 shenanigans.
Yeah.
So that's a shame. But as this has said, that the the events may have been postponed or canceled, but that's no reason that people can't share interest in retro computing with a virtual fair. So they were encouraging people to upload pictures or videos or whatever to their platform of choice, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all those different things, with the hashtag retrofair or retrofair 2020. So we agree with that. People should do that. I'm down with that swirl. Maybe I'll put a link to the pictures I took of my Commodore 64 screen with that information on it in the
sure, why not?
podcast description so people can see it as well.
Yeah.
And if you haven't been on Q-Link Reloaded, you totally should. This is a Wednesday when we're doing this. And because everyone's pretty much in the house, I'm hoping that there will be a good turnout on the Wednesday Q-Link meetups. There hasn't been in a while, so we'll see.
Yeah, and in the same direction goes the other thing of news I got. Commodore Forever actually announced on Facebook that the SCUG meeting 5 scheduled for March 28th unfortunately got cancelled as well. Mm-hmm. And next meeting is to be discussed. Yeah.
We're in such an interesting time period right now in that, like, a lot of things are getting canceled, but a lot of things, I think this is showing a lot of people what you can do with modern technology. Ooh, I burped. I'll get that out.
Like cutting out burps?
Yes. It's showing a lot of people what you can do with modern technology, like video conferencing and whatnot. One of the and being able to hold meetings, at work, we're holding virtual, or remote meetings from home, or we're having the whole managers meeting over the internet,
So you don't have to smell old people.
Exactly. It's so much nicer. I don't have to put pants on for it.
Yeah.
So,
and if you don't have webcam enabled, you even can play with other things.
Exactly. Yeah, you can. Yeah, exactly. So, it's there's so many options, and it's really cool how people are sort of finding ways to keep themselves occupied and still connect to people when they can't actually connect to people.
Yeah.
So that's
connecting in the unconnectable world. Yeah.
Right. So these meetings right now may have been canceled, but depending how long this all lasts, we could have, they could start doing virtual meetings. We just did a virtual. It's not this podcast. It's one of the ones coming up. We did a virtual tour of the
Digital Retro Park.
Yes,
which is a computer museum in Offenbach am Main, in the near of Frankfurt on the Main, in Germany.
Right.
So we made a tour through that museum.
Yeah, which is currently, again, it's closed because of all this nonsense going on. So
exactly.
So there's nobody in there, but we got kind of VIP access through the wonders of Skype, to see all the different stuff, and that'll be coming up. Maybe we'll do that one next, because that'll give people something to do while they're sitting at home, is watch our virtual tour.
But I have to admit, it's a bit tough lately. I mean, when we recorded this for 24 hours before, the login server of Skype was down. Mm-hmm. So this interview almost didn't happen in the video bay, which would have been a waste on a museum.
Yeah, that would have been.
Yeah, and TeamViewer was down. Also, the login server for 24 hours.
Could you imagine if we didn't have video for that? It would be like, so now in front of you would be a Commodore 64, and on that is being played disc. Now to the right of that is, and we would have fallen asleep about 8 minutes into it.
Yeah, so that's the reason actually why we do so much video version podcast recently, because we cover so many projects that actually are better to be visualized.
Yes.
Than audio. Anyway,
Well, the funny thing is too with that podcast, and I should probably save this for the next intro, but I actually wasn't expecting the full tour of the museum. I was expecting to talk to two guys from the museum about it, but I wasn't expecting like an insider tour of all the exhibitions and everything, which was kind of like that was fantastic. I mean, we didn't have to do anything. We just sat back and watched, and it was we were we were like children being like, "Oh, look at that," you know, and that's the best way, you know, that's the coolest ever.
Yeah. So look forward to that. It's a great one.
Yeah. Hopefully, well, I don't know. I don't know if I want to say hopefully we'll still be under lockdown, but hopefully if we are still under lockdown, it can, you know, give you something to do for an hour or so.
Yeah. Anyway, it's an interesting thing that the services are running, but the login servers go down, which is interesting because this lockdown didn't come out of a surprise. It was announced before that, you know, in a week we are probably having to have not a lockdown totally, but a half lockdown whatsoever.
Yeah.
And they hired capacities for the service itself, but not for the login servers. It looks like Microsoft and TeamViewer didn't think of people actually have to log in to use the service.
Well, yeah, of course, yeah.
So, yeah.
You always miss something.
Yeah. And even Steam was down last Friday for a couple of minutes, you know. So it's totally surprising. Actually, people were afraid that the whole internet would go down. But fortunately, at least I can say here from Germany and I guess also in USA, the internet is still stable, but what's causing problems at times is the landline telephony. Anyway. So, other news in that direction, also from Commodore Forever. They announced the replacement IC.
Okay.
And it's PLA replacement.
Yes, another one.
Another one. And I don't know how good this is in terms of compatibility, but we learned that they have big issues with that. You know, I had when I got my Sam's Journey cartridge, I tried a couple of my Commodore 64, and it didn't work on a couple of them. I was like, oh wait, I put in a certain PLA replacements.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes, they are not compatible with this and that cartridge. Oh, then I use another one. Oh, that isn't compatible with that sort of cartridge. Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So
they need to make a SID effects of PLA cartridges that will automatically pick the right PLA for the software.
Or make a PLA that is 100% compatible to every software or cartridge.
Well, that's the difficult part.
Yeah, I wonder why is there
I don't know.
difficulty.
I do not know.
It seems to be impossible to make a 100% compatible replacement for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know. So the Messiah, who makes MIDI controllers and stuff for the C64, as of the beginning of March, they are out of stock.
Wow.
So, and they said it's a problem outside of their control. I don't know what problem that would be, but well, I mean, maybe there's any number of problems it could be right now.
COVID-19, maybe.
Yeah. So, hopefully that'll get back into they'll have stock again, and it'll. Yeah. No, it's the production delays after the Chinese New Year and the Corona outbreak. Yeah. So, yeah. But they will update the page when it's available. So.
Yeah. Well, that would be the news I have got so far.
That's all I got.
Not so much news in those times, right?
Well, in another 2 weeks or so, after people are stuck in their houses, I'm sure lots of things will be getting done because no one else is going to have anything else to do.
Right. Yeah, well, so enjoy listening to this episode and see you in the next one, or hear you in the next one.
Yes. So today we have Johan Grip. He is working on the Commodore 128 Neo. So welcome to the podcast, sir.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
For people who are unfamiliar with what this is going into it, what exactly is the C128 Neo?
The C128 Neo is basically a reverse engineered motherboard for the Commodore 128. The primary target is to preserve the platform as it is. So I have made very, very small changes to it just to make it easier to use, but there are no functionality changes to it.
Okay.
It's basically been inspired by some of the other work going on, like Shaki and Rob Taylor people doing the Amiga 500++ and the Re-Amigas, etc.
Well, I actually learned from it first time about in the Facebook group, Amiga Facebook group, and there they said it started as a Reddit thread, and then I read about it in Lemon. So it was cluttered over a couple of places, and you were having conversations over there.
Yeah, that is correct. Technically, the first place I actually showed anybody what I was working on, that was not a close friend, was on actually Rob Taylor's Discord in his C64 thread.
Okay.
Aside from that, when I actually had the Revision 1 board, so the first one I made, when I had one soldered together and actually working, so I knew that I had something that would actually be useful in the long run, and I hadn't all wasted all my money. I basically decided to let's just start posting about it a bit. So I've posted on Lemon64. I posted on C128.com, the forums, forum64.de, exercising my horrendous German, but there you go. And also on Reddit.
It's interesting because it's not the first time somebody's coming up with this. Last year we spoke with Peter Reichenbach from Switzerland, who did the 128 RM or remastered,
well,
but
working. I don't know if he actually finished it.
I don't know, but he tried to get 500 pre-orders and didn't, because the scene was very skeptical if it was bloatware. This is basically always the problem.
Well, I think one of the major issues that people had with it was the fact that it was designed to fit in a 64 case, rather not a 128 case. So people were kind of wondering what the application for it was. It's a 128 that doesn't have the 128 features like the extra keys and stuff. So it met with a lot of skepticism from that. But with this, you're not trying to make money off of this. There's not like a limited. There isn't a minimum amount of orders that you're gonna scrap it if you don't hit that, right?
No, I said my plan is to really just release the Gerber file so anybody can just make their own if needed. So my primary goal is to preserve the platform. That said, there are a lot of people who are unsure about the whole getting PCBs manufactured and want something a bit tested. So I'm planning on making smaller runs and sell off for that type of purpose. That will basically be at cost, to be honest.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, actually, about the size of the PCB, you actually wrote in your blog that is the reason why you don't want to make the PCB fitting in a C64C case, because you would have to get rid of some features.
Right.
Yeah, that is correct. That is, if I look at what he did with the 128 remastered, his primary goal was basically the key defining feature of that project was to squeeze it into the C64C case. which I can understand. It's a case that is being manufactured right now, so it's readily available. I just wasn't comfortable with the amount of compromises that you would have to do so, because you won't have enough space to put all of the I/O that you want.
Right.
The obvious, the extension would be to make a small breakout box for the additional I/O, but now you're having a really horrible, weird contraption with a docking station in essence.
But that is actually what Gideon's Schweitzer is doing with the Ultimate 64. The user port is external, or not, kind of internal, but you have to buy it extra because of the space problem.
There's headers on the board where you can kind of pop it in, but how you do that is not just having a user port. Yeah.
I know. Yeah. Well, that is actually a good point. So I wonder, as I said, you maybe are planning to release a small batch, or as I said, for your self-cost price. What is the self-cost price, if this is not too much of a secret?
I can't really state because I don't know the volumes, and of course the manufacturing price of the PCBs depend heavily upon the volumes. But it's for sure going to be less than €100.
Really? Okay. Well, as I said when I talked to you via Reddit chat, I really have two left hands. So I hope you will consider us. And even AJ proved that he can drill a hole into his PCB.
Yeah, we don't talk about
that. That's actually kind of the origin story. I don't know if you read it on my blog, but I basically dug up my first computer, which is a Commodore 128, out of the basement, and decided to bring it back up into working order again. And It's funny that you mentioned hole in the PCB, because there is actually a fairly sturdy hole in that PCB, which I had to work around.
Yeah. I wondered why it is a Swedish system handbook, but now I understand.
Yeah.
Because I thought, why is it in Swedish?
I didn't drill through the motherboard itself. I drilled through and to this day, I do not know what the thing is called. It's by the power connector, and it's a loop with some wire.
It's a coil.
It's a coil. Yes.
The line filter. Yeah.
There you go. A line filter. Okay.
Yeah.
The line filter is actually identical to the one from the C64. So if you need to replace it, that's where you would find one.
Well, Peter Reichenbach said just bypass it completely. You don't really need it.
Technically, you could just jumper it.
Yeah, that's what I ended up doing.
It's basically something that's primarily there to meet all of the FCC and Rundfunkstörung.
Yeah. But
which is now the EC, exactly. I understand. Yeah.
I'm trying to find that part to order it, to try to even look up what I'm trying to find. In all the schematics of these machines and whatnot, it's just there. It's just it's a part. It's never got a label. It's never got a name on it. It's just a thing that's there. Yeah.
Filter coil probably, or something.
That is actually correct. It is a part that was custom made for Commodore. And in fact, I have to say, aside from the chips themselves, the part of the board where you find the most weird things that are really hard to source is actually in the power delivery section.
Really?
Yeah, the power socket, the square DIN, same as the Amiga, it's next to impossible to find. The power switch is really hard to get. I haven't even tried looking for the 128 reset switch because...
Yeah,
the line filter, the diode bridge, rectifier, etc. It's all weird stuff nowadays.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. So now you mentioned the case thing. Is there any alternative? Actually, did you think about that, or do you really need a normal C128 case?
The Neo board as is right now is, as said, intended to be a direct replica for boards that have gone beyond salvageable. I mean, I have a couple of 128s. One of the best looking ones I have when it comes to all the plastic, etc. There's actually corrosion on the PCB.
Oh, okay.
And it's not from a battery leak because they don't have batteries. It's simply because moisture have managed to get through the solder mask and started getting into the copper.
So it's
And
basically rotting away or something.
I had, the funny thing, I had a C64, a 64C that I got on eBay, and I got it mostly for parts. And it looks, on the outside, it looks gorgeous. The plastics are not yellowed. Like, the keys are beautiful. You open it up, it looks like it's been brining for about 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, indeed. And I realized if I have a 128 that's been stored fairly decently with that type of problem, there will be other people. Also, people who have stumbled a bit with a screwdriver, made a big scratch in the board. I mean, there are only so many jumper wires you want to do on a board before you start giving up.
Right.
Yeah, that's actually the funniest thing, that Commodore really made bad quality stuff with some computers. I have a French C64, and it looks like the converter for the signal of the French CCAM was soldered by a teenager in homework. And actually, I was talking to Peter Kittel from Commodore, who was in the support department in Commodore Germany, and he said that actually it was homemade by German students with a soldering iron.
That's amazing. That's great.
So my assumption was 100% correct. This is how the French C64 were made, and it still said made in West Germany, and it has certification by German postal service back in the day, and after that they made this horrible solder job, and the CCAM board was just separated with a piece of paper to avoid shortcutting. And that was the whole thing. There was only a piece of paper, and of course nowadays it would shortcut because the piece of paper is rotting away.
Commodore quality right there, yeah.
Yeah, that's totally amazing.
Yeah, on the topic of Commodore and component, etc., quality, I mean, there's a very interesting talk done by Bill Hurd, where he talks about aging retro computers. And you have to remember, they had to make things on a very tight budget.
Right.
Me, as a reverse engineer, I really don't care. I socket everything because it's convenient. I use more newer components, etc. But back then, they were fighting and struggling over every single cent on everything.
Right.
So, as he usually says, he's amazed that they even lasted 3 to 5 years.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting because it's something you mention on your blog. You write like, don't worry, my re-implementation of the C128 will not have all these ugly fixes the original computer has.
There are some places on to clarify. I've been working off the revision 9 PCB layout, which was the last one available.
Okay.
And there are some, even if you take a brand factory new one and you flip the board, you will find traces cut and jumper wires soldered in. There's an ugly resistor soldered under the CPU, for example. Mm-hmm. It's actually called R102, which is there for a couple of reasons. It generates the clock for the Z80.
Right.
It's a bit weird. And all of the small changes I have made to the board is basically to integrate these fixes straight into the PCB. So instead of having to get a direct replica and then cut traces and solder jumper wires on your new shiny board, I decided to basically just put that in there so you don't have to do this.
Wow. Okay. Wow. That's interesting.
So you could almost say it's a revision 10, but I left it a revision 9, Neo, revision, blah.
Interesting. Okay. So you are a hardware developer for a living?
No, I'm actually a network engineer.
Oh.
Since many, many years.
Okay. And how did you make this jump?
I've always tinkered with electronics as a hobby on the side. I mean, anybody who grew up with a C64 knows that one of the first things you do is you pop the lid and put a reset switch in there. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the old Commodores was also the entry gate for me into the world of digital electronics.
Okay.
Interesting.
It's cool too, because a lot of these things, the 128 being the exception, that's a little bit more complicated. But I remember as a kid using my 64C and thinking, like I was almost afraid to open it up because it was so complicated. I look at that thing now. It's a shortboard 64C. It's the simplest board in the world. The amount of chips and resistors and whatnot. It's like it's a tiny board. There's not much on it at all. It seems like so simple in retrospect, having now worked with more complicated systems and looking back at this and being like, wow, this is something that Jens Schoenfeld made the 64 Reloaded based on the shortboard 64C, and I can totally understand how that wouldn't be that hard a thing to do. A 128 is a little bit different because the 128 is like the Frankenstein's monster of all Commodore machines. There's basically three different computers.
Three computers.
Yeah, crammed onto one motherboard.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, that I can agree with. I mean, I actually had to lay one out, so and I already had a cheating template because I could just look at the original board while I was laying this one out. But on the bottom side, there is actually a comment there by the original board designers where it goes R.I.P. Herd Fish Guai Par.
Yep.
And I've chatted a bit with Herd, and he's explained the story behind that comment. And Fish, Guai, and Par are basically the board layout engineers.
Right.
And all four, they were basically locked into the board layout room where they did the layout, running 24-hour in free shift. So they would just hot seat and swap seats. And of course, Bill had to be there at all times just to answer questions in case they had any. Why is this that way, and what are the criteria, etc. So when they were finally done laying out the PCB, because it's a monster, there are over 300 components on this thing.
Yeah.
It's 16 by 10 inches. It's huge.
Yeah, it is.
When they finally had it laid out, they added that comment at the bottom going, okay, we're done.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that, AJ, because we had an interview back then with Scotty Allen, the iPhone guy, and he said exactly the same thing. An iPhone isn't so complicated. The ports are just smaller.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Well, there's more of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I totally agree. And also, it's the same here. I mean, if I look at the Commodore 128, now that I worked a lot with it, it's not really hugely complicated. The thing that makes it slightly more interesting is the Z80 sitting there on the bus.
Right.
It gets fantastically interesting with all of the memory management stuff going on. The latching between the data buses and all of the various address buses being flung around, but it's still relatively simple technology. All of the individual logic gates are broken out. It's not just integrated into one big blob in the center and call it a day.
And the Z80 is actually the first thing that gets called when you turn it on, right? Because the Z80 looks and sees if there's something, if something is there, and if not, then it hands over the functionality to the 85010 or whatever it is, and but it's like the Z80 is the first thing that gets pulled.
Yeah, correct. The Z80 basically is the boot processor, and if I remember the story correctly, they couldn't make the CPM cartridge from the C64 work because it simply pulled too much power.
Right.
That cartridge pulled something like 2 amp on its own, because it's a whole computer in a box.
Yeah.
So he couldn't do that within the budget. And the Magic Voice cartridge did some fantastic trickeries with the Game and XROM lines, which confused the machine. So he solved it by basically grabbing a Z80 and slapping it on the board and calling it a day.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a great machine. I love the 128. The 128 is I've got my 64C set up as my main Commodore machine, but my 128 is over there, and I think it's the best 8-bit machine that anyone's ever made. because it's just the upgrade over the 64. I always wanted an Amiga. I couldn't get one, so I ended up getting the 128 as my upgrade. And it is a huge upgrade over the 64 with software that uses the 128's abilities.
But how many people use the CPM mode productively?
CPM mode, I booted it up to look at it, and that was about it.
That's pretty much what we all did, I think.
Yeah.
And we ran the pip command as guided in the manual once to make a copy of the CPM system disk.
Yep.
And that was pretty much it. But you also have to remember, due to the design of this, the Z80 is actually hampered performance-wise.
Yes, right. It's running at like half speed, right?
It runs at half speed, yeah. Because what happens is, I might be wrong on which one does what, but the C64 is designed so that the CPU uses the address and data bus when the clock is high, and the VIC chip uses it when the clock signal is low.
Right.
So the 128 obviously does exactly the same. It has to be C64 compatible. So in order to squeeze in the Z80, because the Z80 runs at a higher clock, it doesn't have the same pipeline design, so it needs a higher clock speed to remain effective. So it runs at 4 megahertz. But of course, they have to give half of that to the VIC chip. So it runs at 4 megahertz, but with a 50% duty cycle. So it basically goes clock, clock, sleep, sleep, clock, clock, sleep, sleep.
Yeah. Yep. This is the same reason why the 128 doesn't hit full 2 megahertz unless the 40 columns are turned off, unless they turn off the VIC chip.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah.
Interesting. You know so much about the 128. I'm not needed here anymore. I have no idea about these technical terms.
And actually, I will say that I have used CPM more recently because my job, actually, they still do their general ledger in the CPM version of DBase. So one of my first tasks working there was to figure out a way, how do we continue using this software rather than upgrade to, newer software, which would be the logical step, but how do we keep using the old software in the event that this ancient computer they have it running on dies? And so I actually dove back into it and figured out how to run DBase for CPM on the Commodore 128 in such a way that I could easily throw my 128 in that office if I need to.
There you go.
Nice.
Nice. Yeah, I have a friend of mine who recently just left the company, but they were actually reconciling all of their expenses using a compact portable, still with the 5.25-inch floppies and everything. You just look at it and go, wait, what?
Yeah. They print out on an ancient Okadata dot matrix printer every week. They print out the general ledger on an entire ream of tractor feed paper, and then they put it in a box and they throw it in the back room, and then they do it again next week. I don't know why. I don't understand why this is done. And I don't know why they can't, because DBase still exists. It's still a software package that you can get that runs on Windows. And all you need to do is just import your old data. And I'm like, well, why don't we just do this? And they're like, no. Got to use our customized CPM version of DBase, until the end of time. And so we need to keep making finding these computers that can run it, which is so this may be the only instance in which my retro computing clout actually came in handy in the workplace.
Well, we have to admit, the good thing about the C64 128 is good printer support.
Yes.
So you probably could even connect the old printer to it with the right cable or...
It's right here. I've got the... Hang on. I've got that cable right here. It's a... Where did that go? Not that anyone at home can see this at all. Right there, the Super Graphics Junior interface.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Centronics interface, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yep, Centronics interface.
I had a Star LC10 back in the day, so I wish I still had it.
I have the 20, and I still have it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, going back with the C128 Neo.
Sorry, sidetracked a bit. Yeah.
We do this a lot.
That happens. So the 128 Neo, basically, as said, I think I will do another revision to finalize some of the board design.
Okay.
Due to the lack of mechanical drawings, I once again bungled the mounting holes for the RF modulator. So you can't actually put one on without breaking off the mounting tabs. Whoops.
Oh.
And also the RF cage around all of the video chips is also not... You have to really force it and fudge it a bit to get it to mount.
Right.
So, but I will solder one together and make sure that it still works electrically. And fix up those mounting holes. And with the revision free, I think I will basically start releasing the files and selling a few boards. So
Wow.
should be
really,
around January.
Really, please let me buy one from you, one of those few batches, because I pre-ordered from Peter and I didn't get mine. I was a bit sad, you know.
Yeah.
That would
Because-
be a problem.
Yeah. If you remember me, so that would be good. Yeah,
And I'm looking at the pictures of the boards, and these things are gorgeous. They're the ones that you're producing are red, and they're well. I mean, they look fantastic. Not that, if you put these together, you're not really going to see the board all the time, but this is definitely a case for someone making a clear 128 case. And
No, the Rev 2 boards I ordered now are actually green, so they look
Wow.
similar to the normal one. But
no.
I'm personally a fan of that red color. I like it. So that will probably be the color I sell.
Okay.
Wow. Perfect. Well, red is my favorite color, so.
And with these, so people would need to put in the chipsets from an actual 128. You need to find somewhere source the chips from and put them in and solder everything in yourself. Or does the ones that you're selling, will they have sockets and whatnot soldered on already, or is that just for?
No, it's blank boards.
Okay.
So you will have to do a lot of soldering.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's it. Will be a lot of soldering. There will be a bill of materials for anything that is sourceable.
Right.
So in my case, for example, one of the things that makes it look so neat is I replaced all of the capacitors with modern axials.
I see that.
So it's multi-layer ceramics. So it makes the board look so much tidier, not having those sticking up everywhere.
It does.
I see.
Yeah.
So I will need to find somebody to solder it for me.
Yeah,
Okay.
You don't want me to do that. I mean, if you want me to do it, I'll try it, but it'll be just a mess of solder.
That said, once I'm done with this Neo board, I'm planning on starting to work on what I will call the Neo Plus.
Okay.
Which is the part where I will deviate from being a one-to-one replica and really go to town a bit.
Okay.
So you just say rather wait.
Wow.
No, if you need a replacement board, please buy one whenever you need one. I mean, as I said, I'm going to try and keep them as cheap as I can, because my primary goal is to preserve the platform of the Commodore 128 as long as possible.
Right.
The Neo board is where I will start looking at moving the logic chips to surface mount, for example. Reworking the power input instead of using the original Commodore brick. I'm planning on doing the same as on the C64 Reloaded, just a standard 12-volt plug.
Okay.
And these type of smaller changes.
Here's one for you. What about as far as the video out? Because it's not that easy to find a monitor that will take the RGB output for the 128's 80 columns.
That's basically what I was thinking as well. I want to... The thing I will do on that board, it will be the power feed. Surface mounting anything that can efficiently be surface mounted. Dropping the RF and integrating the composite and super video generation straight on the board. Okay. And also flipping the RGB to analog.
Okay.
Interesting. So that means you should be able to plug it the RGBI, so the 80 column. You should be able to just plug it in straight into an RGB SCART.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
Interesting.
That's interesting because most cables I heard only allow this 18 columns in black and white on a SCART cable, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, the board itself has RGBI, so it's CGA compatible. If you actually find a CGA monitor you can plug it straight in and it will run.
Yes,
because it actually the RGB is TTL level, so it's 0 and 5 volt. But you can fairly easily put a DAC on there, or basically a level converter, to convert it into analog RGB, which you can then feed into a SCART.
Okay, interesting.
The reason you only get black and white right now is the chip actually generates composite out of the box, but it's only monochrome.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the main thing stopping me from using it as my main 8-bit machine, is just simply because I want to use the 80 columns, but I cannot find... The Commodore monitors cost a ridiculous amount of money for some reason, and CGA monitors cost even more. And, I don't trust myself to put together one of these converters. And again, it's not that elegant a solution as far as... making something work. You're going to have this board plugged into another board, which is then plugged into the wall and all this other nonsense. Whereas I'd rather just be able to plug the thing into a monitor and have it go.
Okay.
That's basically what I would try to do on updated revised edition.
Awesome.
So this Neo Plus, for when are you considering that?
That one is going to fall firmly in the category of when it's done.
Okay.
when it gets around to it.
Yeah,
exactly. That sounds like Phase 5 and keycaps.
No, don't even use that word.
That's another story.
But maybe you should mention that, because I was thinking about maybe doing something in the Amiga side of the land.
Ooh, okay.
But I started realizing, and take this the right way, but some of the remaining Amiga zealots are as weird as they've always been.
They're terrible.
But I'm not talking about the Phase 5, the Amiga company. I'm talking about the Austrians who collected money on Indiegogo for 4 years ago for keycaps, and they never came around either. So
all right.
Yeah.
I mean, I also have seen the Mega 65 project, which I admire greatly.
Love it.
But I have no idea what they're doing with that funding round to make injection molds.
Yeah, I don't understand how it's working. I from what I gather, they're doing similar to what you're doing, where they're going to sell a small amount, but mostly it's there for preservation, and they're going to release the details for the board so anyone can make one once it's there. So it's a great. I love the Mega 65. I really, really want one, and I'm saying it again in case any of them are listening. I really, really want one, and I'll happily do a review if someone sends one to me. Hint, hint, wink, wink. But yeah, it's been taking a while to do things, and it's.
In that case, they also have to actually develop the custom chips by themselves.
Right.
I mean, I don't know VHDL or Verilog, so I'm studying.
Right.
Because ultimately, of course, I would like to reverse engineer specifically the MMU and the PLA in the 128.
Right.
Because those are really the big custom special ones for the 128.
Mm-hmm.
And the MMU, for example, register-wise, it is prepared for 256K of RAM.
Yeah.
But Commodore could only manufacture chips with up to 48 pins, and there simply wasn't enough pins left to pull that out.
Right.
So the registers are there with the bits and everything, but you can't actually use it.
So, I learned so much about the 128 today. It's amazing.
I might even have a go at the Holy Grail and see if I can get rid of the Z80.
Oh, wow.
Because it would simplify the board design so much, and it's something that, as said, not a lot of people really use.
Right.
Yeah.
Or make it an add-on, like the user port on the Ultimate.
It's unfortunately not really something you can do as an add-on. It requires quite a lot of hardware on there.
Yeah.
Okay.
In theory, I could. I'm wondering whether it's worth the effort, seeing as I have the normal Neo to really do that type of pull.
Yeah. Do they still make the Z80? It's I think it's still produced, correct?
It's still produced by Zilog at that.
Yeah.
It's a popular CPU. It's relatively cheap. I can buy a 4 megahertz DIP one today. I bought a new one. I ended up using the old one on the 128 Neo that I put together, but I have a new one lying around.
Well, it's still used in watches, old MP3 players, and other electronics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If only the 8510 was.
Well, on Forum 64, you have Androsid, who does a lot of, and his merry gang, who does a lot of work reverse engineering the Commodore chips.
Right.
They're the people behind the FPGA SID.
Yes.
Yeah. They're also working on a universal Commodore CPU.
That would be amazing.
Which is FPGA based, and the CIA.
Okay.
So they're slowly poking along at making a plug-in compatible FPGA-based CIA that you can configure to be the 6522, 6526, 8520, etc.
So 2020 will be a very, very exciting year.
I look forward to the day when we can get FPGA replications of almost every chip in these machines and make suddenly a brand new C128.
Yeah.
That'll be...
And I really do admire the Ultimate 64, but it's a very usable, nice machine to use as a daily driver. But if you want to tinker, I really prefer having them all individual, split up, and you can just go with the oscilloscope and go, okay, what's on here?
Right.
Yeah, right. Well, it's interesting because it seems just this year, a lot of more hardware designers are concentrating on the 128, while the years before everybody avoided it and everybody was concentrating on the C64. So it's good to see there is a shift in a way.
It is. I like that.
I agree as well. I had a look around. The two other projects that I'm aware of is the 128 Remastered, which I don't know the current status of.
I believe it has been canceled.
Well, he just
disappeared.
Deleted his homepage. He stopped replying to emails. He disappeared from Forum 64.
Yeah.
Like, wow, thanks. You know? Well...
dealing with retro people is not something you can do if you are easily annoyed, I think, because everybody has very firm opinions on everything.
Well, you know, AJ and I, we always suggest to people, like, don't give up the first try it a second time, try it a third time. Try Indiegogo with flexible funding. There are a lot of ways, but a lot of times people who are doing projects, they are expecting like 500 orders minimum, and if they don't reach it, they cancel it, which is sad. You know, maybe they were just 400 or 300 or something. We don't know. Yeah.
No, I think they also set sometimes the goals are set a bit too high.
Yeah.
For what's feasible. I mean, in my case, this is something I would do whether other people were interested in it or not. I just want a brand new 128 motherboard.
Right.
I just need somebody that I can pay for doing the soldering work for me. That will be hard.
Well.
It is a lot of work, unfortunately, which is also why I'm not really willing to do it on my own,
yourself.
Because then the price would go up quite a bit.
I see.
That's basically the other thing I'm thinking on with let's say a Neo Plus is, of course, I will collapse all the ROM chips into Flash, and also the RAM chip, just replace it with an SRAM.
Okay.
So all the suggestions people made on Lemon on the forum, like do this, do that, this will all happen in the Plus version.
That's basically the plan. Yeah, that's the one where I will take the shackles off and really start redoing things.
Okay.
But I wanted to have a direct one-to-one for the repair crowd and etc. I mean, I'm sure there are people who do repairs on these things that sometimes the only reasonable option is to slap a new board in there.
Wow. So I will be very looking forward to the final product then. I hope
Absolutely.
I find somebody doing the soldering work for me. And finding a case in eBay Germany that isn't a ripoff.
Yeah.
And another difference I've done compared to Shucky and Rob Taylor, for example, is they're using this Sprint software, Sprint CAD.
Right.
Because it allows you to put a picture of the PCB as a background image, and then you can just trace the traces on top of this. Mine is actually done up in KiCad.
Okay.
Because it's an open source EDA suite. So I actually have a full schematic as well, not just the PCB. I have the full schematic.
Okay. Cool.
Which has now been validated against the PCB when I laid it out, because you had the schematic in the service manual and the programmer's reference guide. It contains a few issues, which I will document on my blog.
Okay.
So my plan on the so I have the schematic, which means I can start tinkering with making bigger changes and still be fairly confident that it's accurate according to the schematic. It's harder if you don't have the schematic, because if you move a ship, you have to keep track of where everything went.
Right.
So that will also probably be released over time.
Okay.
You have a lot of plans.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I love it. I love it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, no, as I said, it's not exactly a cheap hobby. I mean, with components and boards so far, I'm getting edging up to €1,000 laid out so far.
Right.
But it's fun, and it's a hobby, and it's not a proper hobby unless people look at you and go, "But why would you want to do that?"
Right.
People tell me this all the time. Don't tell me about it.
Good old hacker's credo is always valid. If you have to ask why, you're not the intended audience.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Gosh. So the plans and all that, people can read about it on the on your blog, which is C128.se.
Well, let's ask him. Let's just say, where can people go to find out what you're doing? Where they can read about it? How any other extraneous sites where they can find out stuff?
The most of the liveliest discussion is in German on Forum 64.
Okay.
Google second liveliest, second liveliest I would say is Lemon 64 Forum.
Okay.
Which is pretty good. And of course my blog at C128.se, which is where I will start going into a bit more detail. All of the changes I made on the board I will document on there, the reasoning behind them, etc., etc.
Okay. Cool.
So
awesome.
That's also probably where you will find all of the latest news on other evolutions on this.
I have one question. On this Facebook group, the people were discussing that on Imgur you actually had photos of the start screen where the upper and lower K letters were switched.
Oh,
and
yeah.
People were discussing why that happened.
You know, on the international 128s, you have this little carrier board for the character ROM.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
With a wire that you have to solder to the board. Yeah. That happens if you leave that wire unsoldered.
Oh, interesting.
Because it actually connects to address line 11 on the ROM. And if you leave it floating, you can get all sorts of funky. And that's where I screwed it up. On the revision 2 board, there's actually a pin header.
Right. So
that you can solder on a pin and just use a quick connect. So if you need to remove the character ROM, you don't have to break out the soldering iron.
Okay. Interesting. Now we know the secret behind this.
Yeah, it took me a little while to realize what was going on there, because I eventually soldered on the cable to it, but since I'm using a socket, I couldn't solder it on the top side. Mm-hmm. And it goes to one of the logic chips, U15, if I remember correctly. And when I flipped the board to solder it on pin 2, I, of course, forgot that now you have the mirror image of the circuit. So I soldered it on pin 2, but it was pin 2 on the wrong side of the chip.
Ooh. Okay.
So I connected one of the address enable logics line that basically arbitrates between the CPUs and the VIC to be address line 11 for the character ROM. And
I see.
That was really spectacular.
Yeah, people notice everything. You know.
Oh yeah, no, I know. There's a lot of detail poking at it. Yeah.
That's so great. I'm so happy that you spoke to us about this. It's amazing, and I'm very happy to hear that this project will progress further, because it seems to be a bit repetitive if you talk to people and their products always fail in a way. But it's good to see that it's finally happening.
No, I mean, as I said, I'm currently at the state where I could release the Gerber files and you would be able to build a fully working computer. It's just nitpicking a bit with some of the mechanical holes.
Right.
I mean, the Revision 1 board, I don't know if anybody on Facebook noticed, but I had even forgotten the mounting holes. So there were nowhere to put the screws to mount it in the case.
Well, drill it yourself.
Could work, yes. If your hand is steady enough.
Yeah, and if you didn't catch a trace, or slipped with the drill,
So, no, I'm aware of these things going on as well. There's a lot of projects you get interested in and then they just disappear. So that's also why I held off on announcing, as I said before, until the point where I actually had something I knew that was working. I mean, when I soldered the first one together, the Revision 1, I soldered it together, I plugged in the power, I turned it on, there was no smoke coming out, and there was a picture on the screen, and I was just absolutely amazed.
Yeah.
Great. I would like to know, because a lot of people mentioned that, how was it? Did you work with the Chinese factory, or did you do it in Europe? Because when we spoke to the other creators, they said that PCB manufacturing in China is a problem because they don't know what you need and what you're talking about regarding those old computers.
I'm not really interacting with the factories. I'm using the various online services. So I just send them the Gerber files and they produce accordingly. If there's a boo-boo in those files, I will get a broken board. They do some basic sanity checkings. They will run a design checker that you don't use traces that are too narrow, that are too close to each other, etc. But my software helps me with that as well, KiCad. So
Interesting.
I'm basically just using a web service. I upload my files. They will tell me how much it will cost. And there you go. So,
and the quality is pretty good so far.
Yeah. The company I'm using for this is JLC PCB, which is one of the large Chinese ones. They're based in Shenzhen.
Yeah. Scotty Allen made promotion for them as well, though. They must be good.
The two big ones is really JLC PCB and PCBWay.
Yeah.
And I have yet to evaluate PCBWay. I do know they actually have a mounting service as well for through-hole components. So with them, it should, in theory, be possible to get one that's pre-populated with the capacitors, the resistors, the sockets, and those type of things. But I haven't really looked into that venue yet.
Okay.
I might, or somebody else might. I mean, once I release the Gerber files, anybody can do whatever they want, really. Yeah. It will be open source in essence.
What happened actually with the Swinzit back in the day? Suddenly people were catching it up, and there was a NanoSit, Swinzit Plus, Swinzit Ultimate, Swinzit Ultra. I was like, okay, so many Swinzits, So,
and I also have to say this is one of the areas where I am slightly cautious about releasing the actual KiCad project.
Right.
Releasing the Gerber files is something that is very easy to use to manufacture a PCB, but if you want to start doing additional work with them, it's harder because you might start seeing wonky clones.
Right.
I don't mind people manufacturing their own boards, but I don't want somebody to end up with a Commodore 128 Neo, which doesn't work because somebody else was poking around with it and didn't rename it.
Right.
I don't remember. Was that a problem with the Swinsit stealing, or how you say it? I don't know.
Well, yeah, once it was out there and anyone could make them, people were making their own little versions of it that were supposedly better than the original, and some didn't work quite as well, and it's just suddenly the quality of the whole thing as a whole drops because not everyone knows what they're doing.
You start doubting the whole concept eventually once you see all of these weird wonky ones. So yeah, that is also a factor that is considered, of course. But going back to the PCB manufacturing, I mean, if I look at the Chinese ones, the prices are, it's hard to compete with them. For small prototype runs, there's almost no competition. As an example, there's a Belgian PCB house. They offered me 440 euros per board.
Whoa.
Just for the PCB, which obviously is not exactly something that's sustainable.
No, not at all.
No, if I go to them and want 1,000 or 10,000 boards, of course the prices are going to be a lot more competitive with the Chinese.
Right.
But for small-scale prototypes, there is a reason why pretty much everybody goes with JLC PCB, PCBWay, and Osh Park in the US, which just outsource it to the Chinese in the end anyways, I'm sure.
Yeah.
All right.
But I also have to say, doing electronics nowadays, you have fantastic open source tools like KiCad. You have the capability of getting professional-looking PCBs manufactured for not a lot of money, and so on. It's become so much easier to do these type of things.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Well, we'll put links to everything that you mentioned before in the podcast description so that everyone can check them out and find out what you're doing.
Yep.
Well, thanks for sitting with us today. I'm so
Not
happy.
a problem. It's fun to be here. I've been working on this almost in secret for a couple of months, so it's kind of also nice to be able to actually finally talk and discuss with people about it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as I said before, I was so unhappy with Peter disappearing. Like, okay. But now I know I just need somebody finding to solder for me and the other things.
So
will
if
not
anybody
be a
listening wants to solder this for Joerg, it's
not
contact
for free.
at
Not for free.
it's podcast@sceneworld.org. Just give us drop us a line and
solder for Joerg.
Yeah.
Help wanted. Yeah. That's fun. That's fun.
Yeah.
Righty. Alrighty.
All right.
So have a good
right.
evening. All
Same
right.
to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So that was Johan Grip with the C128 Neo project. You can check that out. There's a blog about it showing all the information at c128.se. That is c128.se. And of course, the link will be down there in the description. There's also an early group of pictures that was posted on Imgur, however you say that, showing some of the prototype boards and the system running and whatnot. And we'll link to that as well, because I believe we mentioned that when we talked to him.
We did. This is how I found out about him.
Yeah. So, yeah. So with us, you know where to find us. You're probably already there because you're listening to us. And
Sceneworld.org.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. So until next time, stay safe.
Yeah.
Keep away from the Roni. And
wonderful.
yes.